far as the Left Behind book series that a lot of people are drawn to and hooked on.
That's right, and that Left Behind series was put in all the major bookstores.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't get my book in any bookstore.
Of course.
But he has his books everywhere. Okay. Now, I do believe in the imminent coming of the Lord Jesus Christ for those who are truly born again, but I do not use that biblical truth as an excuse to do nothing.
Exactly. Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
Okay. And this is what this Jesuit rapture theory has done. I never call it a rapture. That's a Latin term. I call it the appearing, which we see in 1 Timothy 2:13 and 14. Okay, back to the list. We have Pat Robertson. Pat Robertson, by the way, said that there's going to be no Christian persecution in America. I saw him say it myself. You got Bill Bright for the Campus Crusade for Christ. You have previously Frank Shakespeare. Frank Shakespeare was the head of CBS at the time of the Kennedy assassination. And he was a Knight of Malta. He went on to be the head of the Heritage Foundation. I have one of my advisors told me, this guy was in Air Force intelligence, he said Frank Shakespeare was one of the 5 most intelligent men he ever met in his life, and he met him in Egypt.
Now, Egypt is the capital or the headquarters for the Muslim Brotherhood, is that correct?
That's correct. Cairo is the capital for the Muslim Brotherhood, and that's where you have your Grand Orient Lodge there out of Cairo. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's the foundation for all the Islamic Brotherhoods. We have to remember that the Knights Templars, during the Crusades, secretly worked with the assassins.
Yes, they did, Eric. Go ahead.
Okay, so it shouldn't be no surprise to us to see the Knights, the Masons today working with the Muslims in the Middle East.
So what's your opinion about Saudi Arabia and Mecca being the homeland?
Yeah, well, Saudi Arabia became Saudi Arabia, as you know, in 1932, when the Saudi family was given Saudi Arabia by the Jesuits through Mussolini and Churchill. Because Mussolini and Churchill began to heavily finance the Saudis after that, and Saudi Arabia will become the oil monopoly of the Black Pope in 1934. The oil concession was given to SoCal, Standard Oil of California. It was considered the greatest commercial transaction in history at that time. And it was Sir John Philby, who was an English Knight of Malta and a private advisor to King Ibn Saud, who promoted giving the contract, not to Britain, but to the American Standard Oil of California, which is absolutely run by the Knights of Malta.
Right. Well, you got Rockefeller, who was the founder of Standard Oil, right?
That's right. And Rockefeller is also a Knight of Malta, and he's connected with P2, and he's also a member of the Rotary Club in New York City. So everything that the Jesuits want to finance, they call on the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation to fund whatever they want. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. We have
stretch away from the CNP again, and let's get back on that.
Okay. Thomas A. Bolin. Thomas A. Bolin was a Knight of Malta. John Bolt. Oh yeah, Thomas A. Bolin was a Knight of Malta. He was connected with Roy Cohen, the sodomite. Cohen was connected with Joseph McCarthy in the McCarthy Inquisition. And Joseph McCarthy was, he was the one that came out and wanted to free all the Nazis involved in the Malmedy Massacre. So McCarthy was a Nazi defender, and he's connected to Bolin. Bolin was a Knight of Malta, and Council for National Policy. You got John Bolton. John Bolton was a Knight of Malta. He was representative to the UN, Knight of Malta. Richard Mellon Scafie. Richard Mellon Scafie is a real devil. He's involved with the Heritage Foundation. He is the inheritor of the Mellon fortune. And Richard Mellon Scafie is a great financier of many, many of these fascist desires. As you said, there's really no such thing as right and left. They're all the same. But for the purpose of the Hegelian dialectic, the Jesuits controlling both the left and the right for the purpose of bringing about their synthesis or their end game. You have Sun Myung Moon. Sun Myung Moon is a Knight of Malta. And, of course, as we mentioned, him financing Falwell. That's why Falwell had no power in his preaching. Whenever these supposed Bible-believing men of God compromise like this, they have no power. It's the same way with James Robinson. I remember the days when James Robinson was a great preacher. He's nothing anymore because he's a member of the Council of National Policy. You got Richard V. Allen. Richard V. Allen was a national security advisor to Reagan. He is a Knight of Malta, Council for National Policy. Edwin Fulner. Edwin J. Fulner is a very interesting fellow. Edwin Fulner was educated at London School of Economics. He was also educated by the Jesuits at Georgetown University. He also received his B.S. in English at Regis University, which is a Jesuit university in Denver. So Edwin Fulner is a very key person in the Council of National Policy. You got Oliver North. Oliver North, another Knight of Malta. He was an evangelical. He converted to Catholicism, and now he's a Knight of Malta, and he's the hero of Fox News and war stories, and, of course, never telling us the truth. You have Joseph Coors. Well, the Coors men are all Knights of Malta, Council for National Policy, making lots of money by furnishing their Coors beer to the troops. You got Rich DeVos of Amway, James Dobson. Yep, James Dobson.
As far as the Amway group, I read that the Prince's, Eric Prince's sister married into the Amway family.
That makes sense because Eric Prince's mother is a member of Council for National Policy. So, and Eric Prince used to be Dutch Reformed. He converted to Roman Catholicism, and his right-hand man in Blackwater, now renamed another name, I can't remember. Xe. Joseph Schmitz, he was a Pentagon inspector, worked in the Pentagon, and when he was called on to investigate Blackwater, he refused and went and joined Blackwater. So Schmitz here is another Knight of Malta, running Blackwater as a bunch of crusaders. Now we have, let me see, James Robinson, I mentioned him, Tom DeLay, that wonderful man, James Dobson, Jerry Falwell, the late Jerry Falwell, Joseph Farah, that journalist. Joseph Farah seems to be very conservative, but he's in the Council for National Policy, tied to the Heritage Foundation, and also to the National Review. National Review is founded by William F. Buckley, one of the most powerful American Knights of Malta in the country. He recently died. And so National Review is going to continue the socialist, quote-unquote, right-wing position. Remember, socialism is never, ever conservative. Whether it's fascism or communism, they're both socialist, and that is a maxim that everybody must abide by, and if you're not a socialist, you can't be a member of the club. Okay, next we have...
when you say socialists can't be part of the club, does that mean that you have to be part of the Fabian Socialist Society?
That's right. The communists and the fascists are all educated at the Fabian Socialist London School of Economics. Remember, the Fabian Socialists were called by Bismarck. They were called the Red Socialists, and he called the Jesuits the Black Socialists. So the Fabian Socialists, controlled by the Jesuits, they birthed the British Labour Party. The British Labour Party birthed the Labour Zionists. And thus we have a tie to the British Fabian Socialists directly to the Labour Zionists running Israel for the Pope. Okay, now we have, in Council for National Policy, we have John Stormer. Well, he was the one who wrote the None Dare Call It Treason and then a 25-year update, and that was the book that recruited me into the John Birch Society. And much of what he says in there is true, how the U.S. government financed all this communism all around the world. Absolutely true, because one of the purposes of communism is to destroy the nationalists of your country. One of the purposes for the Cold War was to destroy the nationalists, the true nationalists of every country. Okay, we have John Whitehead, another individual who's done a lot of writing. Now, for the Knights of Malta that are involved in the Council for National Policy, we have William E. Simon. He's died now, I believe, and his son resides in California. But William Simon was the Secretary of Treasury, I believe, during the 70s. And he is the one responsible for being involved in extending the loan to Chrysler, of which time Lee Iacocca was the head of it. And Lee Iacocca is another Knight of Malta. He was an intimate friend of Cardinal Spellman, and he was also, and is still today, a co-conspirator in the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Wow.
Because he was the one involved in removing all the primary strikes out of the limousine, and he sent his head of security at Dearborn Division of Ford Motor Company, Carl Renus, to drive the limousine to a Cincinnati firm where all the primary strikes could be removed with helicopters hovering overhead. So Lee Iacocca is a major player. Lee Iacocca is another backer of NAFTA. He wrecked our domestic manufacturers in this country. He went to Clinton and personally requested that he would pass NAFTA or sign it into law. All right, we have J. Peter Grace. He was in Council for National Policy. He's deceased now. Now, this is interesting. Henry Morris and Duane Gish. I mean, I've seen both these men speak. When I was in Bible college, we had Duane Gish appear there, and he's just an excellent defender of creation. But here he is now, busy serving papal agendas by being in the Council for National Policy along with Henry Morris. Henry Morris wrote a book called The Genesis Flood. It's probably the best book on the topic I've ever seen. Founders for the Creation Research Society also. We have Jesse Helms, 33rd degree Freemason. He's deceased now. Nelson Bunker Hunt. Nelson Bunker Hunt's a Knight of Malta. Jack Kemp.
He was the Hunt family.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And he is, I have it from a fellow author. He wrote the Serial Killers. I forget the name of the full title. But he names Nelson Bunker Hunt as a Knight of Malta in that book. We have the late Jack Kemp, who recently died. He was a 33rd degree Freemason. We have John Singlob. I believe he's deceased. He's another Knight of Malta. All these Knights of Malta and their open policy constantly beat the anti-communist drum. But now, since the Cold War is over and we no longer have a communist threat, you're right, it's the beating of the drum against the Muslims. That's their big one. Okay, so now we go on a little bit low. Louis Lehrman. Louis Lehrman's a very important character. He was another co-founder in the Council for National Policy along with Paul Weyrich. And Paul Weyrich and Louis Lehrman are both papal knights. Louis Lehrman for sure is a Knight of Malta. He's the former owner of Rite Aid. So all these Rite Aid drugstores,
yes,
belong to the Louis Lehrman family. Louis Lehrman was a Jew. He converted to Catholicism, and they made him a Knight of Malta.
Kind of sounds like Rite Aid is like a Walgreens. Is that pretty similar?
Yes, very similar. It's a national firm. You find them everywhere in all the malls.
Yeah, it's exactly like that, right? Yeah.
And it's pharmaceutical, so that ties into the pharmaceutical industry, which ties into the oil industry. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Hey, we're going to take a break, guys. Everett, can you pick a good song here, and let's take a break here for the first half-hour segment here.
Yeah, and definitely I want to let everybody know that I'm having extreme technical difficulties over here. We can't load the chat up, so we are trying to work through it, and that's why I've been kind of quiet. So we're going to go ahead and get into a little bit of Nas here, talking about America, and we will be with you guys in approximately 4.5 minutes.
We have Eric Phelps on the line. We have been just discussing the CNP, the Council for National Policy. We're naming a lot of names here, guys. Please bear with us. It's a lot of information to absorb. Eric, let's get back into the CNP.
Okay. Now, Eric, I had a question for you real quick here. I found my notes, and you had mentioned Louis Lehrman earlier. Now, Louis Lehrman was the author of the PNAC docs, right? Or one of them?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure what he authored. All I know is that he was the owner and builder of Rite Aid drugstores.
Yeah, and he also wrote a book with Ron Paul, I believe, in the early in the early 90s about trading gold, I believe, which I think is very interesting. One of those little things, little snippets I picked up from The Secret Right, the new film by Josh Reeves, goes into a lot of the info that you're going into. I don't know about as in depth. And now in John Birch, I was not aware. Did you mention the fact that, or no, excuse me, why don't you go ahead and lead back into the CNP? I'm sorry, get you off track.
That's okay. If you got a question there, we can deal with that. The John Birch Society really was the forerunner of the CNP.
Right.
So,